Hello everyone, I'm Valarie Starn and welcome to our show. This is Westminster Mayors, looking back and moving forward. It's your opportunity to meet the mayors. We have a terrific program lined up for you. We are here at the beautiful Margie L. Rice Theater. And joining me on stage, we have the current Westminster Mayor Tree Taw. Welcome. We also have the namesake for our beautiful venue today, Margie Rice. Also former Mayor Kathy Buchoz. Also former Mayor Joy Neugebauer. And rounding up the line down on the end there, former Westminster Mayor Phil Anthony. We want to welcome you all. And we're going to start off by getting to know you a little better. So we're going to be on a first name basis from here on out because this is our audience's chance to really get to know all of you. Tree, I'd like to ask, when did you first come to Westminster, and tell us a little bit about your background and your family.
I was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and I came to this country in 1992. At the time I was 19 years old. And when I came here, I went to school and I have a degree in political science. And I met my wife in 1998 in Westminster. That was the reason I decided to move to Westminster in 1998.
And at the time, in '98, that was a transition for you and a new chapter in your life. Describe the community at that time.
That was amazing. I had a really good experience. The community in Westminster is so amazing. I have a really good experience. I met a lot of community activists in different communities in the city of Westminster. So I think that I love the city and I want to get involved with all the events and activity in the city of Westminster.
Margie, let me ask a little bit about yourself and your family, and where are you from originally?
Alabama. I moved here in '47 from Alabama, lived in Long Beach, and then moved to Westminster in 1956. And the next year we incorporated the city. It was not a city when I moved here. It was a county island.
Now, initially, that moved from Alabama to Long Beach. What was happening with your family at the time?
Well, my husband was in the service, and when he was discharged, we moved here.
And then from Long Beach over to Westminster.
Well, it was a good chance to buy a home. They were just building new homes here in Westminster, and in Long Beach, they were very expensive. And we found we could buy one in Westminster, so we moved here. And it was all orange trees and orchards and dairies and fish farms and dirt roads.
A different community back then.
Absolutely.
We'll hear more about the changes as the years go by.
Yeah.
Let's go to Kathy, though. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in West Virginia. My grandparents lived in Long Beach. We visited here every summer practically as a child. And then my father brought the whole family here in 1953. So grew up in Long Beach and later was married and had 3 children. Later was unmarried and found myself with 3 children. Eventually then I met my second husband, and in 1973 we married in 1974, and that's when we moved to Westminster. Prior to that we had lived very close in the area, from Garden Grove to Huntington Beach, where we bought a first home, and then bought our home in a brand new home in 1974, right in Westminster.
You both started, I'm interested to see that you both had started in the Southeast and wound up in Long Beach first. That was the initial draw to Southern California. Well, let's move on to Joy. Where did you grow up, let me ask, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
I grew up in Ohio, and during World War II, met a GI, married him, and we started our married life in Chicago, Illinois for many years, and 4 of our sons were born there. But we moved to Indiana, then to Ohio, and then we started our own business, an industrial aerospace related business, and moved to Long Beach, California, where most of the aerospace industry was located.
All of us came
We
from
lived in Long Beach for a year, then we moved to Westminster. And Westminster, with our 5 sons, moved to Westminster. That time there were 3 elementary schools in Westminster. So I became very interested and involved in education with our sons and commuted to Long Beach to work also assisting in our business.
You lived many different places, and I'm going to guess that your favorite hometown is going to be Westminster, but if you had to pick a second of all the places that you've lived, where in the country did you enjoy the most?
I think it would be Indiana, and that surprises me because when we moved to Indiana, I discovered for the first time people in Indiana have an accent too, just like Margie, that identifies them. And I grew up in the state right next, Ohio, and I didn't realize Indiana people had an accent. But I think when we left Indiana, I took that hometown newspaper for 2 or 3 years, and we just lived there like 3 years and through the most terrible tornado you would ever want to be a part of.
You lived through a tornado?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I have a lot of notes on you, Joy. I did not know you survived a tornado. That's wonderful. We're glad you're here. Phil, let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself and if whether or not you survived any tornadoes in your in your time.
Not close, not even close. But I was born in Iowa, where all good Californians used to be born. And we came out to Long Beach when I was 8 years old.
Oh,
And then to Westminster when I was 12 and when I was starting high school. But Westminster in those days was even more rural than Margie and others have said. We had an acre and a quarter. We had a walnut grove across the street, a horse ranch next to that, and people had little farms all around.
Yeah.
We had 2 horses in the backyard when I was going through high school, which was very nice.
Yeah.
And
So you were one of
chickens and a big garden. It was very rural, very rural.
Yeah.
And
you
long
were one
before
of the
city.
first families in Westminster. What brought the family there?
Well, my father particularly grew up on a small farm back in Iowa, and we lived in a little house in Long Beach for a while, but he wanted more space.
Yeah.
So we were looking for more land. So we went from a little home in a regular tract house in Long Beach to a 1.5 acre miniature farm in Westminster.
Oh, yeah.
The next question I would like to pose to all of you is that first inkling that inspired you to become involved with your community. And for some of you, that was a run for city council. For others, that was at a PTA level. But so Tree, what first inspired you to serve others by serving your community?
I think the community in Westminster really motivated me to run for office. When I moved to Westminster in 1998, I got involved with the community in Westminster, and then 2006, many people that came to me, they convinced me to run for office, and even before that, the Westminster City Council, they appointed me to be commissioner in the Energy Committee. So I think that that was a time that I want to give back to the community. I love the country. I love this country so much. This is a free country. Gave me the opportunity to learn, give me the opportunity to give back to the community. So that was the reason I decided that I run for office, because I just want to give back to the community.
And you had a political science background.
Yes.
When you saw the opportunity to perhaps lead the way in the Vietnamese community to hold office never held before, was that inspiring, challenging? How did others react from within your community? What was that experience like for you?
I think I want to run for office because I want to serve everyone, every community in the city of Westminster. And that's the reason why that I promise to myself every day that I have to be an honest and fair person when I'm in office. I'm here to serve the community. I'm here to serve the Caucasian. I'm here to serve the Latino community. So I'm here for everyone, for every single resident of Westminster, because that is Westminster about. That's it, this country about.
Yeah. That's
Very well
us.
said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Margie, how about you? What first inspired you to run?
Well, I began in Long Beach. We had a Mothers Club there in Long Beach. We sponsored Little League and did a lot of Easter, all kinds of programs for our children. And so I was involved beginning there. And as my children grew up, I become very involved in PTA presidents in all the schools. And Then was urged to run for the school board, and I served 17 years on the school board after I came to Westminster. And each time I changed office, I had a reason. And usually it was because I disagreed with the person that was in the office that I ran for. We had early childhood education back then, and the reason I ran for the school board was because they put teacher aides in the classroom that were not trained, and I felt that teachers spend so much time training and getting an education, it wasn't fair to just appoint a parent to go in the classroom who was not qualified. So that's why I went in the PTA, and that's why I ended up on the school board. And when we came to this city, I worked to help it become a city, to become incorporated. And then I
And what year was that?
1957, we incorporated. And then after that, I was urged to run for Midway City Sand Board. They had a group on there that were not compatible. They argued a lot, and so I thought maybe I could help, and I've been there 25 years on that board. Then when I went to the city council to ask why they were making the city attorney a city employee instead of keeping him on retainer, the mayor would not give me an answer. So I told him I was going to replace him, and I ran, and I did. Because I feel when we're in public office, we answer to the people who put us in office. We're there to serve the people. And if we can't answer when they ask us questions, then we need to get out of office.
We're going to talk more about that because we're going to talk about your time on council and the changes that you did make.
Well, that's why I ran for the council.
I want to move on to Kathy, though, to ask what first inspired you? What was happening in your life that you chose public service?
Well, I wasn't inspired to run after so many years of being involved in the community. I had 3 of my children. My husband had 3 children, so we had 6 children together that we raised. We were called the Buchoz bunch. And so we were involved in all of their activities and their sports and PTA and you name it. I don't think there was anything that we didn't miss. And my husband and I both were involved in a lot of the leadership roles. But at the time I was working for a law firm right around the corner from City Hall. And many of the people that we had coming to the law firm were having difficulties with the city for one reason or another over land use, or it's part of the codes that they were having difficulty with, and thought that things were old-fashioned in the city. And it was a number of the attorneys in our firm that said, you know, we need some new blood. We need some new people to get on that council. And they suggested me, and I thought, I have never thought of that, you know. And they said, well, I checked with my husband. My husband said, hey, you run, I'll be your campaign manager. And so I did it, not really knowing what I was getting into, but it was very interesting. And the more I got involved, I realized that there needed to be some changes in the city. There were lots of things that were, things were changing, and yet the city wasn't changing, the staff, the council. And so I thought I could make a difference. I had an agenda and a number of things I wanted to accomplish. I think I did most everything that I set forth.
Right.
Well, again, we will get into
That's
those.
what we got into.
We will cover those issues in our show. But I do want to ask Joy, how did it begin for you, your desire to serve the public?
As most things in my life, with my family. And when my sons, and my oldest son then was in 2nd or 3rd grade, attended one of the 4 elementary schools in Westminster at that time. Of course, I went to school also, and I became publicity and newsletter chairman. So one of the first meetings I attended was with our high school superintendent and principal. The only high school in Westminster to serve Westminster was in Huntington Beach.
Right.
And the year before we moved there, the bond drive election failed to build the 2nd high school at Westminster. When I left that meeting, I was treasurer for the Huntington Beach Union High School District Improvement Committee. I held that for 15 years until we built every school that's in our high school district now. Within a year, I was also chairman of the Westminster School District Elementary Improvement Committee, and we built from 4 to 19 elementary schools, with me being treasurer and or chairing each bond. It took 2 elections, first a bond drive and then a tax override. The bond played for building the school, tax override for putting furnishings in the school to make it ready for the students. And during that same time, the same 15 years, I also chaired our Westminster March of Dimes Mother's March.
Yeah.
And along with being a den mother, a Little League mother, PTA president at about 3 or 4 different schools, plus the PTA consul. But during my years there, I decided that I met so many worthwhile people, people that were interested in our community, gave of themselves unselfishly, and I decided that they deserved better representation than they were receiving. And about that time, I decided it was time for my husband to suggest that I run. And in a few months he did.
Excellent. Thank you, Joy. So, Phil, tell us your experience. What started it for you?
Going back farther in history, when I got out of Huntington Beach High School, which was the only school in the area, only 6 high schools in all of Orange County. And I went from there into college and graduate school. And by the time I got back from graduate school, they had formed the city. And the first city was not too good. The council members made a lot of mistakes in those days, so bad that some of them had to actually leave the council, and it created a vacancy. And they were going to fill it by appointment, and so my neighbors thought I should try for the appointment. Of course, the remaining bad old council members would not appoint me. But 2 years later, when the seat came up for the regular election, I ran and was elected in 1962 when I was only 26 years old.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was the second youngest councilman in the state of California. So I was young and foolish, but I meant well. And I then went on from there and served 14 and a half years.
At 26 years old,
Yeah.
were you feeling confident? Were you feeling intimidated?
No, I was a scientist by training, and I was working in science and engineering and aerospace, and I was learning the council job as I went. But the first few years were a little bit hectic. We had some people there that weren't too genuine. But then when you get elected, I helped you get elected, and that made things better. So I'd been on the council 4 or 6 years maybe, and then that's when Joy came on. And the council got better from then on.
Yeah.
We will hear more about all of your experiences on council, but we're going to take a brief break right now. Stay with us. We'll be back with more Westminster Mayors.
Dinner makes a difference. Learn more at casafamilyday.org.
Welcome back. I'm Valarie Starn, and you're watching Westminster Mayors, looking back and moving forward. We want to return back to Joy and ask a few questions about your time on council, because you really forged the way for women. You were the first elected councilwoman. You are also the first female mayor of Westminster. Those unique challenges you were able to overcome. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I actually felt very much at home serving with 4 males since I have 7 sons by the time I ran for city council. I felt comfortable in a male-dominated situation. But when I went on the city council in '68, I'm one of 2 of our living mayors, the other being Phil, that took their oath of office in the old Hoover School, which was our first city hall. Because when I was elected, the elections then were in March. I took my oath of office there, and in October, we moved to the present Civic Center on Westminster Avenue. At that time, I was one of 2 women on city councils in all of Orange County.
That's right.
And women were not really welcomed with open arms by a male-dominated group.
True.
And my early experiences, I asked to visit each department head. When I visited the police department, the chief had a migraine. When I visited the fire chief was there and tried to entertain me by saying, his grandfather always said women belonged in 2 places. One was the kitchen. Okay. So that was a challenge, but I have always, in every office I've held, directed my attention and concern to issues, not the people that necessarily I work with, but to the issues and how they can be solved in a manner that best serves the majority of people. But I will say, my first election in 1968, there were 13 candidates, and 2 or 3 of them were former mayors of our city. And I spent $72, and I was elected. And in my first 3 terms, I spent over $500 totally for 3 elections and was re-elected, re-elected, re-elected. So, but then when I was first elected, our population would have been under 20,000 in that area.
Right.
So everybody knew everybody.
Didn't take any money.
But our city grew much faster, and it was exciting to be there during the time that our administration building shared the police department when we first moved. And the only 2 buildings on the Civic Center were the council chambers and the police building, which also served as the council chamber.
Well, I want to ask, and if you'll be patient with me, I want to go back to Phil, because at the time you were serving on council together. Phil, what were some of the issues of the day? What was important to you?
Well, I want to ask her the other place that women belong. You want to tell us that or not?
You can't ask that question.
So
it would
ask
be
her-
unladylike for
ask
her to
your
answer.
question again.
Oh,
Never
So the
mind.
question for you
that
again.
would be.
As you served together on council, issues that were important to you, the issues of the day at the time as a young councilman, what were some of the votes that mattered to you, issues that you championed?
Well, as Joy implied, the city was just beginning to grow then. And it really started slow, and then it got faster and faster and faster. The original council, which I sort of was the next generation, they did some very bad things. They were letting in a lot of very cheap apartments. In fact, they were zoning or allowing land that was zoned something else to be built as apartments. And that was really hurting the city. And one of the things we did was we stopped apartment development at all for 10 years. After I was on the council a couple years, for 10 more years, we didn't allow any apartments in town. We were trying to encourage better quality housing and hopefully bring in some tax base. Because in the beginning, Westminster was a classic bedroom city.
Yeah.
All homes, different kinds, and virtually no tax base. So controlling the cost of the city government, as well as finding new sources of revenue, were extremely important. And that was one of the things we worked on very hard in the early days. But until Joy got on, I was there 6 years, and I did support you for election.
Yes.
That's why you got by so cheap. But anyway, the early council just made a lot of strange decisions, and we were trying to get that straightened out, and it took a few years. And getting Joy and some others on the council really helped that really big growth
Made a
period,
difference.
because it started growing. You know, just all of Orange County was expanding.
Do you feel you were able to make a difference?
Oh yes, absolutely. We stopped the really bad development. We brought in much better quality housing tracts, and we finally got some tax generating commercial and light industrial going, which led eventually to the Westminster Mall.
And remind our audience again, what time frame is this?
Well, I went on in '62. She came on in '68. And that's when the real growth in Orange County started, big time. And we were dealing with that for years. And it finally got under control. But one thing we did that's very unusual, shortly after she was on, in fact it started in '68, the council was trying to save money. We started lowering the city property tax rate, which is unheard of. Nobody does that. All the local governments, they get all the taxes they can. If anything, they raise the rates. But starting in '68 and for 8 years, we lowered the tax rate every single year, which probably has never happened at any place in California, maybe not in the world. So that was what really was a trend of just trying to have a whole climate of spending money very carefully and hopefully reducing the burden on the taxpayers.
I want to skip over to Margie. You also forged a way for women as another first. You were the first elected Westminster mayor, as Joy was an appointed mayor, and the first elected mayor. What was happening at the time, and what was your experience?
Well, I can't even remember why I ran for mayor. I think because we weren't getting any new development, we weren't moving forward too much, and the mayor we had at the time just could not get the council to cooperate with him. And so I told him, I think I can do a better job, so I'm going to run for mayor. And he said, all right, then I won't run against you. And he supported me, and I ran, and was very fortunate to be elected for 12 years.
What were some
Every
of the
2 years I was elected, but I had promised the school district when I left there that I would strive to build a theater because we had no place for graduations. The little multipurpose rooms weren't large enough. And when my son graduated from the 8th grade, he had to go to Huntington Beach to graduate. And I felt we needed a theater and a performing arts theater and a banquet room for proms and for just all kinds of weddings, everything. So I proceeded right away to start trying to make money to build a theater. And it took about 3 or 4 years to really get going. And, but I had lots of support, and the Mayor's Ball generated a lot of money for us each year, which I started again. We had Mayor's Balls in the past, but I don't know what they did with the money. We never heard. So when I became mayor, I dedicated the Mayor's Ball money to the theater. And our mayor is still continuing that at this time. We have a foundation that does that.
And here we sit today in the
Yes.
beautiful
In the
Margie
very
L. Rice
theater.
Theater, also nicknamed the Rose Theater. This facility, it's not just for Westminster. This is special for the entire county. What does this
anyone
represent
that
today
wants
for
to
you?
rent it. But the council did, when we opened this theater, we passed a resolution that there would be no wavering of fees for anyone, because people have a tendency to come and want to use a facility, but they don't want to pay for it. And with the lighting and with the expense to run a theater, you have to charge. So it isn't real expensive, but we have stayed with that resolution, and I do hope the council continues that there'll be no wavering of fees for the use of the theater.
And Kathy, I am certainly not skipping you. I'm going to be right back to you. But in speaking of firsts and acknowledging that the two of you still serve on council today, you alongside Mayor Tree Ta, Tree, you have a significant first. The first elected Vietnamese American to serve as mayor. And that's not just in Westminster, Orange County, the state of California.
Yes.
That's the first elected in the United States.
Yes.
In the whole world. In the whole world.
As
Very
far as we
true.
know. Yeah.
Probably. What do you hope to accomplish by opening that door?
After I first got elected to be the first Vietnamese American mayor in the U.S., there were a lot of expectation from everyone around the world. And I received a lot of interview from people from other state or even different country. But I really honor and I feel blessing to be elected the first Vietnamese American mayor. And I feel that I want to continue. I want to accomplish that former Mayor Margie Rice and the rest of the City Council have been doing, because I truly believe we have a really good City Council. We been working together so well, and we continue to move our city forward. I think that we support the non-profit organization. We've been trying to streamline the business license process. So all we do that we want to support, continue to support. I want to continue to work with every member on the council, all the members of the city council and the staff and the non-profit organization and the community out there to continue to move our city, because I truly believe that is a teamwork. It's not about myself, it's not about Margie, it's not about Carty, Joy, or Phil. This is the city of the people. So the people actually running the city, the people in Westminster, they decide to elect all of us to be public servants, so we could have their voice. We could able to give back to the community. That's what I truly believe. And I also want to honor all the sacrifices of 58,000 American soldiers who fought for freedom during the Vietnam War, and the millions of Vietnamese died during the war because of freedom. So we came here for freedom. And I truly believe that Westminster is a symbol of freedom.
Yes.
That's why we work
Right.
together. We move the city forward. That's what I truly believe.
And you have a beautiful tribute right here in the heart of your
Thank you.
city, that
Thank you.
memorial.
Thank
If you haven't visited the memorial, that's definitely something to put on your to-do list. Thank
We
you
built
so
that
much.
when I first came on the council.
Kathy, I want to jump over to you. You served at a time of when cultural diversity was really coming to surface in your city. It's when Little Saigon became, it was on the map all of a sudden. Here comes Little Saigon, and it happened right as you were serving your city. What were the challenges there? What was your experience at that time?
Well, there were a lot of challenges in the beginning. The fall of Saigon was in '75. Thousands and thousands of refugees at Camp Pendleton. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands coming to the United States. I believe that the proximity of Camp Pendleton to Orange County created a place for them to have an identity, to start opening a business. I remember the very first business that opened in about 1978, even before I was on council, which was a little restaurant that no one knew what the name was, how to pronounce it, who was it, what kind of ethnicity was it. But I was very active in the chamber back then. 1980, when I got elected, one of the things I wanted to do was to put together a task force, which we worked with our state legislators in trying to develop an understanding. There was a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of myths, a lot of apprehension. There was a lot of people that were very afraid. Remember, this was a group of people that came in mass, and pretty suddenly, I mean, it seemed like it happened almost overnight, and it was a group of people that didn't speak our language, they didn't look like us, they didn't dress like us, they didn't eat like us. And then we had the awful, ugly Vietnam War. So these folks came with such handicaps, I believe, that it was very difficult for them, and it was very difficult for the host community to accept. We had a lot of people that couldn't accept it. that left, a lot of businesses that left because of it. The reason, and part of it, what I tried to do was to work with the assimilation and try to bridge it together if I could. And it was very difficult. We had lots of racial problems, lots of criminal problems with young gangsters and that back in those days. But remember, these were young people coming here that didn't understand our way of life at all. They came from a very, war-torn country, that they were very depressed there, and coming here was just a whole new world for them. One of the things I did too, because we knew that this was going to grow, was to establish a redevelopment agency. The city before had rejected it, but we knew that this was a way to increase funding for the city.
Right.
So we got that established. Another
For
thing.
members of our audience
Yes.
that might not know, redevelopment agency is a common term over at City Hall, but not necessarily in every neighborhood. What is a redevelopment agency? How does it work? How does it help?
Well, it's an agency that has the ability to set aside money for certain projects. It started out originally to be for just blighted areas. And we had some blighted areas in the city of Westminster. The city of Garden Grove had the redevelopment agency for a number of years. And so I worked with their people over there with their redevelopment to put together and establish a redevelopment agency here to assist. And it really has generated a lot of money for the city to be able to do a lot of things that they couldn't have done before. And unfortunately, just until most recently, of course, the state took away all the redevelopment money, which left poor Margie and all the folks on the city council with
Left
a
us.
dilemma.
Yeah.
But another thing I wanted to mention, I was the one that really got the election of the mayor. Before it was always rotated, and many cities
That's
still
right.
is, but I thought it was important because people think that they elect their mayor.
That's
If you
right.
go out and ask, and I found out, people didn't know that you could make all kinds of deals and make whoever mayor you wanted out of the city council. But we
right.
got it on the ballot, and it passed like 3-1, so it enabled the elected mayor to have a little bit more of a voice. There's the same veto power, but it does give you a voice. But a lot of things that I thought was important to give Westminster a recognition. We knew it was going to grow, especially with the mass enclave of refugees coming here. So a lot of things I tried to do we changed the name from Westminster Avenue to Westminster Boulevard. We are now a big city.
Yeah.
There are a lot of little things, but I think what has happened is the understanding has come to full circle now. You can see with Little Saigon how the growth is, but it was very, very challenging. With the school districts, you can imagine what they went through, but now it's, they welcome it. After a while, it was more of a welcoming experience. And they were very entrepreneurial, so the big thing is there were like only 3 shopping centers on Bolsa, and Bolsa, from Bolsa to Ward, is considered the Bolsa corridor. And that was really where Little Saigon took off.
Right.
And there were lots of vacancies, and the rents were very, very low. And landlords were pleased to get somebody to open a business. And when you opened a few, and then they were able to tell their Vietnamese relatives and friends, and then one after another, it was very hard for the city to keep up with it.
Right.
To keep up with business licensing and signage and municipal codes and all. And I think it was important that we started to get more involved and get them involved in our city government. It was very hard in the beginning to get anybody to even think about running for city council from the Vietnamese community,
Yeah.
or even to volunteer for anything.
Right.
And then they were afraid too. They were afraid that they wouldn't speak correctly, and so there was all this inhibition and all. But as you can see, it's come to full circle.
Well, here we are today.
Here we are
exactly.
today. Yes.
Exactly.
It affected the schools too, badly.
Yes.
In what way, and how did they
Well,
overcome?
our teachers were not qualified to teach those children because they couldn't speak the language. So we had to hire teacher aides, that could speak the language, and to eat in the cafeteria, they didn't know how to eat in our cafeteria. We had to have special people in there. And it cost us a lot of extra money to take care of the influx, but we worked it out. And I had one parent call me one time, and her son had a goldfish, and he put it in the toilet. And he didn't know it would disappear if he flushed it. And they were just so upset because they lost that fish. And things like that. It was minor, but to them it was a tragedy. He lost his fish. And all kinds of things that we went through on the school board, believe me.
Well, you've made such progress. One landmark in Westminster, the Westminster Mall. Phil, I believe it was during your time on council the Westminster Mall became a reality. What was your experience?
It started when I was in the council. It actually opened when I was mayor. But that was a very big challenge because we had all these housing developments around, and the land that became Westminster Mall used to be a fish farm and a regular farm, bean farm. And developers approached us while I was in the council to try to get that land rezoned to build a housing tract. And we rejected that because that was a potential site for a really good commercial development. And finally, the Sears company and their development arm came in, they bought the land, and they, with our help, were able to develop it into a very big mall. Now, it took a lot of special work by the city to help them because they had a better access from the freeway, which we worked with the Caltrans to do that. They had to cover up a long drainage channel, so we worked with the county flood control to do that. And putting it all together, the mall was built and it was opened in 1974. And at the time, it was the biggest mall in the county. Yeah. So here was our dream of finally a really commercial jewel. It created a lot of sales and a lot of sales tax revenue for the city. And that sort of turned the corner to give Westminster really the foundation of business sales tax to really help run the city council.
And in those first years, did the mall deliver what it promised?
Oh yeah, it took off. And it's even bigger now than it was then, but it's still, they had 4 majors in there, including Sears, and a lot of accessory stores. It was very successful virtually from the beginning.
And Tree, today you had mentioned that streamlining the business license process at City Hall. A lot of cities are going online with services to offer residents and their businesses. How is that working? What has your reaction been from the business community? Is City Hall doing enough for them?
I think that Margie and I and the rest members on the council, we are working with staff to make sure that we are streamlining the process to support the business community. I think our staff, they are working online, the business license application. So in the future that the business community, they don't have to come to the City Hall. If they are really busy, they can enter to the city website and get application, fill that out, and then turn it in to the City Hall. And also that we try to work with the Westminster Chamber of Commerce because that is the voice of the business community. And I really appreciate that Margie and all the members of the council really supporting me last year for the resolution.
Right.
We passed the resolution last year that the City Council, we work well with the Westminster Chamber of Commerce to promote tourism in the city. So that goes back to Kathy for Asian Garden Mall, Westminster Mall, the Rose and Margie Rice Theater, Freedom Park. So all the good things in Westminster. So we try to maintain that, and at the same time, we love our senior. We have a really good senior center, and we've been providing really good services to all the senior because we're here to serve. So I'm really honored and really happy to see that all community work together. We work with everyone. We bring everyone together. Like I think this is the first show in the history. We have all the former and the current mayor in one show. I think that is my honor. That is my blessing. So I really thank you all for your services.
Well, that's a good time to take our last break right now. We're going to pause for a few minutes, and when we come back, we'll discuss the future of this city and your vision and whether or not there are specific things you would like to see happen in the years to come. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Because play might be the best way to fight obesity.
Because staying connected makes my family stronger.
Because a safe place after school can lead to success in school.
Because physical activity is vital to my health and well-being.
Because I need to make my world better.
Because playing team sports teaches character and social skills.
Because we need each other.
Because we need each other.
Because we need each other.
It costs about 60 cents for one can of food, and about $80 to send it where it needs to go, and even more for storage. When sending help to those struck by disaster, eliminate the middleman by sending cash. Cash can provide food, water, medical supplies, shelter, and so much more. Cash is best. For more information, visit CIDI.org.
And welcome back. I'm Valarie Starn, and we are joined on stage here at the beautiful Margie L. Rice Theater with 4 former Westminster mayors and, of course, current Mayor Tree Taw. We've been talking about the city's history, all that you've accomplished on council. Let's talk about the City of Westminster for just a moment. The name Westminster, Phil, I will ask you. There happens to be another Westminster, a very well-known one on the planet. Talk about the connection over across the pond.
Well, the original Westminster is the one in London. That's where the Houses of Parliament are, it's where Big Ben is, and it's a very famous place, and it's been almost 1,000 years probably. It's been known as that, I'm not sure. But this, as well as many other places, were named Westminster after London Westminster. We're here, there's one back in Pennsylvania, there's a new Westminster in British Columbia, and I don't know how many others.
Colorado?
Yeah, Colorado, right, Colorado for sure. So there's a lot of them around, but it's a nice name, and we're proud to have it.
And we do have a connection with the Westminster of London.
Absolutely.
Who would like to address that?
Well, I'll start it because it happened when we were celebrating our centennial. Westminster here is the second oldest settlement in Orange County. The original one was Anaheim back in 1857 and Westminster in 1870. Is that right, Joey? 70?
That's correct.
And when we were celebrating our centennial, which would have been 1970, Joy was on, did you chair the committee? You were on the.
I chaired the committee, and I wrote the first 100-year history of our community.
Right. She's really a historian, actually, by trade.
Yeah.
But we contacted Westminster London and invited the Lord Mayor and some of his staff to come over, and they did. And they joined us in celebrating our centennial. This concluded a great big display at Disneyland where they all marched around, including our mayor at the time and the Lord Mayor, and that started a relationship. When I was mayor a few years later, they invited me to come over and visit them. So my wife and I and the city manager and his wife went over to London and had a lovely time there for several days, seeing everything and meeting all the big shots in London, including the Lord Mayor, the town clerk, and a bunch of other people. And then after that, the next thing is we invited them back, I invited them back for the opening of Westminster Mall. And the Lord Mayor, these are different Lord Mayors because they change every couple of years. So the new Lord Mayor came over with the town clerk, and they joined us in the celebration, which was a big celebration, went on for a couple of days, of the Westminster Mall. And the next one was when you went over there, Kathy?
It's in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it was a different Lord Mayor
No,
when we went
guaranteed,
there.
guaranteed.
But we did have tea, and we're to discuss, was sent over there to discuss the idea of becoming a sister city. And he made it very clear, the Lord Mayor there, that they had no intention of becoming a sister city with any other city of Westminster.
In the world.
Well, they would have a long list because
anywhere.
there's a lot of them.
So, yeah. So that was interesting. But it was a wonderful trip.
Yeah.
And at that time, Joy, and it's interesting that Phil refers to you as the historian that you are, because you do run the Westminster Historical Society.
That's right.
Noting that history and the rich history of the city of Westminster, you must have been so proud of many accomplishments and many namesakes and many firsts. What stands out to you about your city And what would you invite people to learn more about over at the Historical Society?
Well, stands out first, I was elected in 68, and I left the council in 1980 by popular demand. And the 4 years.
That was a black year.
I was one of the ones who opposed redevelopment for our city. Yeah. But 4 years later, I came back as the first mayor elected by popular vote, because when they put on the question of directly electing the mayor, they also put a stipulation that the candidate with the most votes became mayor, and second became mayor pro tem. So I became mayor when I was re-elected with the highest number of votes, and Chuck Smith became mayor pro tem. But the biggest change was that there was now redevelopment in our city, and I, who had never been a strong advocate, also became the chairman of the redevelopment agency. And I'd like to point out that one of our when I took my oath of office in November, on New Year's Eve day, the day of New Year's Eve, met with representatives from Huntington Beach to discuss the first redevelopment project, it's the Pavilion Shopping Center at Beach and Heil. And Huntington Beach was holding back approval because that is surrounded on 4 sides by Huntington Beach.
3 sides.
Right. And it's 3 sides.
3 sides.
The other side's a drainage ditch. But anyhow, and their concern was, they had a concern with what you call the Q factor, which has something to do with drainage. And they were going to withhold from their 3 sides unless we agreed to meet and discuss extending Gothard from Hoover over. And so we opened that first redevelopment, one of the major, and that project, I think we just gave that developer $400,000. But then also continuing as chairman of redevelopment, my foot was on the shovel when we broke ground for Asian Garden Mall and Asian Village Mall. And I was mayor when we opened Asian Village, but my term had ended when we opened. But the influx of Vietnamese started when Phil was mayor, but the greatest impact it had, what had been the most economically depressed area in Westminster was that stretch of Bolsa. And with the growth of first Asian Village Mall and then Asian Gardens Mall, that became the highest priced commercial real estate in Westminster. And from there, it just grew and grew. And one of the other, during my term as mayor from 84 to 86, we also repealed the rent control that had been put in place in those 4 years. Right. That time we were one of 2 communities in Orange County then that had rent control. Right. And that was repealed. But my most outstanding memory of my council years has been the opportunity to work and meet with other elected members whose major objective is to, as they see at that present time, what is best to serve the community and its peoples. So that's been a great experience in my life. I served a total of 24 years and have enjoyed watching as our city continues to grow. And I've served the past 20 years as a member of the Midway City Sanitary District. But I would like to put on Phil's credit that our Westminster branch library, Phil used to drag me along to get the women's viewpoint in, to lobby the Orange County librarian. It was Harry Rowe at that time. And Phil was successful lobbying to have our library built, which is just across the street from this facility. But he was gone to the Board of Supervisors, so when we dedicated the library, I was mayor.
But I was
thank you,
back as
Phil.
supervisor.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
That's right.
You have all made Westminster what it is today.
Yeah.
And there is still work to be done. And the
that's
two to
true.
my left are still doing that work. And your input and their service on council is still moving this city forward. On your plate right now, the general plan. How is that project coming along as you focus on the future general plan?
I think so far that we're doing really well. Last year we already approved the funding for our general plan, and that is a good tool for our city council and city staff to have opportunity to look into all the neighborhood in the city, and we're going to come up with a good solution to improve our city, to improve the neighborhood, and to support the business community.
Right.
And Margie, you're more than welcome to explore more if you have any more detail. But I think that so far, and in the future, we're going to need input from the community. We're going to need input from the business people, because we believe that by working together, we're going to move the city in the right direction.
And we have a good council.
Yeah.
But I would like to add about the council that was working with me when I was mayor, because so many times I get credit for the things that were accomplished during that 12 years. I couldn't have done any of it without a good support from the council, and they followed through. Mayor Tarr was my great supporter, and so was Andy Kwok. All of them on the council at that time supported me so strongly that I was able to accomplish all that.
It must have been a delight to have the support of your city council, your fellow council members.
So wonderful to be able to do the things. We did a lot of development. We built not only this theater, we built 2 big water tanks because our water tank had exploded.
Yes.
And so we were able to do that, and the chamber building, the police building, the parking structure, all those things were done with that council. And thank God for the redevelopment, because that's where we got the money. Now, we didn't use that much redevelopment on the theater. That was mostly, the 17 million was mostly through donations. And I begged anyone I could talk to get the money, and we got it. And we started going to Washington, D.C. and lobbying to get the money, and the council supported it 100%.
Is there any one thing that you would say was your legacy? And of course, we're sitting here in a theater named for you. So aside from this beautiful theater that we also very much appreciate, is there any one thing?
I don't really feel that it's my legacy. I feel it's the council's legacy. All the things that we did do and were able to accomplish. And I have to say, though, I'm really proud of the theater, because I promised to do it, and I was very, very fortunate to have the support to do it.
Well, we're all happy that you did. Kathy, you had a different experience on council. You accomplished so much, but in more trying circumstances. Talk about that a little bit, and what you feel your legacy has been.
Well, it's part of public record, I'm sure, but it was, I didn't have a very, I like the word Phil said, genuine fellow city council people, councilmen, because I was the only female there, but that's in the past, and it's over, and they're gone, and not around the city anymore, so it's interesting. I think I'm the only one left that's around the city anymore. But what I'd like to add on to is the demographic changes that are so dramatic in the city of Westminster, that have taken place from the 70s to the 80s, now to the 90s, now we're into the new centuries. But Little Saigon has become so famous around the entire world now. And what I'm hoping that the city council, current city council and future councils will work toward making Little Saigon the destination that it is. There's economically a lot the city can benefit from. Business is down, everybody from the recession and everything else, but tourism is up.
Yeah, it is.
And now that we're established as a real tourist destination, I think the city should work very hard on implementing more visitation ability to all the people around the world. Garden Grove is doing a lot of things. Westminster, while we're growing, we're not growing in a way that I think would benefit the city. We don't have a real hotel, not a major hotel. That's right. People come here from all over the world and they're staying in all the other cities. We're losing economic, financial gain from all of this. So we're hoping that they'll recognize. In 2008, the city did put together that strategic plan for the area there.
We did.
And of course we were hit by the economy and then losing redevelopment money, and now nobody has any money.
Right.
But we really need to this is a good time to plan.
Right.
When you don't have the money, but you can plan for the future when you will have the money. And I think there ought to be some ways we can find even through the federal government in that it's become a historic area. So it's part of history, and I feel so blessed that I've been part of that history there. When I first got involved down there, there was just the 3 shopping centers. It was all agricultural and industrial area. And now it's one center after another with thousands and thousands of businesses and lots of restaurants, and people come. I've done hundreds and hundreds of tours from people from all over the world. But it's right here. We're sitting in the middle of it.
Well, Mayor, is that going to be the future for Westminster? Because we're out of time, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Absolutely, yes.
But it's not only on Bolsa. It's all over Westminster.
Citywide.
That is the challenge for you on council, and we're out of time.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, we're going to invite you back, and we'll see if whether or not you can accomplish these goals to make Westminster the city it is and all it can be.
It's a wonderful city.
I want to thank all of you for participating today, for sharing your thoughts, your concerns, and learning a little bit more about all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for helping to shape the city of Westminster. Thank you again for joining us. This has been Westminster Mayors, looking back and moving forward. I'm Valarie Starn.